So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto became the host for the Silver Surfer's Power Cosmic Naruto x Gamora. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Chapter 1. The Star Child of Konoha. The air in the training ground was thick with the scent of damp earth and the metallic tang of shed blood. Not that any had been truly shed, of course. Not yet, but the intensity of the spar was such that the illusion of life or death combat was almost palpable. Uchiha Sasuke, the last loyal Uchiha of Konohagakure, lay sprawled on his back, his chest heaving as he gasped for breath. His Sharingan, the famed dojutsu of his clan, spun wildly, a crimson pinwheel of confusion and frustration. His opponent, Uzumaki Naruto, stood a few feet away, his hands tucked casually into the pockets of his black cargo pants. His expression was placid, almost bored, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of motion and energy that had just unfolded. He hadn't even bothered to activate his own dojutsu, the Rinnegan, a far more ancient and powerful set of eyes that he pt hidden beneath a carefully maintained genjutsu. "You're getting faster, Sasuke," Naruto said, his voice a calm, even baritone that held no trace of mockery or condescension. It was a simple statement of fact, and that, more than anything, was what infuriated Sasuke. "Shut up, Dobi," Sasuke snarled, forcing himself to his feet. His muscles screamed in protest, but his pride screamed louder. "You're holding back, I can feel it." Naruto offered a small, enigmatic smile. "And what if I am? Fight me seriously," Sasuke demanded, his Sharingan blazing with renewed intensity. "Use your full power." "If I did that," Naruto replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "there would be nothing left of you to bury." The words hung in the air between them, cold and sharp as a shard of ice. Sasuke's jaw tightened, but he couldn't deny the truth in them. He had seen glimpses of Naruto's true power, fleeting moments when the blonde had let his control slip, and it was terrifying. It was a power that dwarfed his own. A power that felt ancient and vast, like the night sky itself. "One day, Naruto," Sasuke vowed, his voice low and determined. "One day, I will be strong enough to make you fight me seriously." Naruto's smile softened, a genuine warmth touching his eyes for the first time that day. "I have no doubt of that, Sasuke. And I look forward to it." Their sensei, Hatake Kakashi, watched from the sidelines. His single visible eye narrowed in thought. He had been training the two boys for over a year now, and he still couldn't get a read on Naruto. The boy was an enigma, a puzzle wrapped in a riddle. He was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, the nine-tailed fox that had nearly destroyed Konoha 12 years ago, but he showed none of the volatile emotions or explosive temper that was so common in Jinchuriki. He was calm, controlled, and possessed a level of intelligence and maturity that was frankly unsettling in a 13-year-old. And his power, Kakashi had never seen anything like it. It wasn't just the Kyuubi's chakra. It was something else, something more. Something that felt cosmic. Their third teammate, Haruno Sakura, was also watching from the sidelines, but her attention was focused solely on Sasuke. She was wringing her hands in worry, her brow furrowed in a way that Kakashi found both endearing and slightly pathetic. She was a bright girl, a gifted kunoichi with a natural talent for genjutsu. But her infatuation with Sasuke was a crippling weakness. "All right, that's enough for today," Kakashi said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Go home, rest. We have a C-rank mission tomorrow." Sasuke shot Naruto one last glare before stalking off, his pride still smarting from his defeat. Sakura immediately rushed after him, her voice a torrent of concerned questions and fawning praise. Naruto watched them go, a faint, almost sad smile on his face. "You're too hard on him, you know," Kakashi said, walking over to stand beside his student. "He needs to be pushed," Naruto replied, his gaze still fixed on the retreating forms of his teammates. "He has a darkness in him, Kakashi-sensei. A hunger for power that could consume him if he's not careful." Kakashi sighed. The boy was far too perceptive for his own good. "And you don't." Naruto finally turned to look at him, and for a fleeting moment, Kakashi saw it again. The vast, empty loneliness in his eyes. The look of a being who had seen the birth and death of stars. "I have enough power," Naruto said, his voice a quiet rumble that seemed to vibrate in Kakashi's very bones. I don't need any more. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Kakashi alone in the training ground, his mind reeling with questions that had no answers. The mission to the Land of Waves was supposed to be simple. A routine escort mission, AC rank that was little more than a glorified babysitting job. They were to guard a bridge builder named Tazuna as he returned to his home, a small, impoverished island nation that was being terrorized by a shipping magnate named Gato. It was the kind of mission that Kakashi had done 100 times before, the kind of mission that was supposed to be a learning experience for his young genin team. It turned out to be anything but. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of two Chunin from Kurigakure, the demon brothers, who ambushed them on the road. Kakashi dispatched them with ease. But the fact that they were there at all was a red flag. C-rank missions didn't involve ninja assassins. Tazuna, when confronted, confessed that he had lied about the true nature of the mission. Gato had hired ninja to kill him, and he couldn't afford to pay for a B rank or higher mission. Kakashi was furious, but he was also a pragmatist. They were already too deep to turn back now. And besides, he had a feeling that this would be a good test for his team. Especially for Naruto. The second sign that something was wrong came in the form of Momochi Zabuza, the demon of the hidden mist. One of the 7 ninja swordsmen. He was a powerful, ruthless killer, a man who had earned his nickname by slaughtering his entire graduating class at the Kurigakure Academy. The battle that followed was a brutal, desperate affair. Kakashi was pushed to his limits, forced to reveal his own Sharingan, a gift from a fallen comrade. He managed to trap Zabuza, but a surprise attack from Zabuza's accomplice, a young boy in a hunter nin mask named Haku, turned the tables. Kakashi was caught in Zabuza's water prison technique, and it was up to his students to save him. Sasuke and Sakura fought bravely, but they were outmatched. Haku, with his Kekkei Genkai of ice release, was a deadly and elusive opponent. It was then that Naruto, who had been strangely quiet and reserved throughout the fight, finally decided to act. He moved with a speed that was almost impossible to follow, his movements a blur of black and orange. He didn't use any jutsu, any flashy techniques. He just moved, and wherever he moved, Haku's ice mirrors shattered like glass. Haku, for the first time in his life, felt a flicker of fear. This boy, he wasn't human. Who are you? Haku asked, his voice trembling slightly. I am Uzumaki Naruto, Naruto replied, his voice calm and steady. And I am the one who will stop you. The fight was over in a matter of seconds. Naruto didn't kill Haku, he simply disarmed him. He moved through Haku's jutsu as if it were nothing, a ghost in the machine. He placed a hand on Haku's chest, and a wave of calm, warm energy flowed into the boy, neutralizing Hai's chakra and leaving him weak and helpless. Zabuza, freed from his water prison, watched in stunned silence. He had never seen anything like it. The boy hadn't used any jutsu he recognized. It was as if he had simply willed Haku to be defeated. It was then that Gato and his army of thugs arrived, their intention to kill Zabuza and Tazuna and take the bridge for themselves. Zabuza, injured and betrayed, was about to make a final desperate stand when Naruto stepped forward. This is not your fight, Zabuza, Naruto said, his voice ringing with a strange authority. He turned to face Gato and his men, his expression unreadable. Leave this place, Naruto said, his voice not loud, but carrying an incredible weight. Leave and never return. Gato laughed, a harsh, grating sound. And who's going to make us, you little brat? Naruto didn't answer. He simply raised a hand, and the sky above them darkened. A low, rumbling sound filled the air, a sound that seemed to come from the very fabric of reality. The thugs began to look around nervously, their bravado fading in the face of this strange, unnatural phenomenon. Then, the stars came out. Not the faint, distant pinpricks of light that were visible at night. These were bright, blazing orbs of fire, hanging in the midday sky like a celestial audience. They pulsed with a raw, untamed power, a power that made the Kyuubi's chakra feel like a flickering candle in a hurricane. Gato and his men stared in open-mouthed terror, their minds unable to comprehend what they were seeing. What is this? Gato stammered, his voice barely a whisper. This, Naruto said, His voice, now a booming echo that seemed to shake the very foundations of the world, is a demonstration. He clenched his fist, and the stars began to move. They streaked across the sky, leaving fiery trails in their wake. They danced and swirled, a cosmic ballet of terrifying beauty. Then, as one, they converged on a single point above the bridge, forming a swirling vortex of light and energy that was so bright it was impossible to look at directly. A beam of pure, white energy shot down from the vortex, striking the ocean a few hundred yards from the bridge. There was no sound, no explosion. Just a silent, all-consuming light. When the light faded, there was a perfect, circular hole in the water, a hole that went down so deep it seemed to have no bottom. The water around the hole was boiling, hissing and steaming as it rushed to fill the void. The thugs dropped their weapons and ran, their screams of terror echoing across the bay. Gato, his face a mask of pure, abject fear, fell to his knees. His bladder letting go in a warm, shameful gush. Naruto lowered his hand, and the stars faded, the sky returning to its normal, placid blue. He turned to Gato, his expression once again calm and unreadable. "I will not ask you again," Naruto said, his voice back to its normal, quiet tone. Gato, sobbing and babbling incoherently, scrambled to his feet and fled, his remaining men close on his heels. There was a long, stunned silence. Chizuna, Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, Zabuza, and Haku all stared at Naruto, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. It was Sasuke who finally broke the silence. What was that?" he asked, his voice a mixture of awe and fear. Naruto turned to him, a faint, sad smile on his face. "That," he said, "was a little bit of my full power." Hinata Hyuga watched him from afar, as she always did. She hid behind the trunk of a large oak tree, her heart pounding in her chest like a trapped bird. She had been following him for years, a silent, unseen shadow. She didn't know why she did it. There was just something about him. A quiet sadness, a profound loneliness that resonated with her own. She had seen him at the academy, the outcast, the pariah. She had seen the way the other children whispered and pointed, the way the adults looked at him with a mixture of fear and hatred. But she had also seen the way he held his head high. The way he never let their cruelty break his spirit. And now she had seen something else. Something incredible. She had heard the stories, of course. The rumors of the mission to the land of waves. The whispers of a power that defied all explanation. But to see it with her own eyes. She had been in the crowd when Team 7 had returned, and she had seen the way the villagers had looked at him. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Awe, respect. She had followed him to the training ground, and she had watched him spar with Sasuke. She had seen the effortless grace, the quiet confidence, the overwhelming power that he held in check. It was like watching a god pretending to be immortal. And she had seen the loneliness. The way he looked at his teammates. A barrier between them that was as vast and as cold as the space between stars. She wanted to reach out to him, to tell him that he wasn't alone, that she saw him, the real him. But she was a Hyuga, the heiress to the most powerful and prestigious clan in Konoha. She was trapped in a cage of tradition and expectation, her every move scrutinized, her every word weighed. But as she watched him now, standing alone in the training ground, his gaze fixed on the setting sun, she made a vow. One day, she would be strong enough to stand by his side. One day, she would break free from her cage. One day, she would be worthy of the boy who held the stars in his hands. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The sound of a distant galaxy. The air in the Hokage's office was stale, thick with the smoke from Hiruzen Sarutobi's pipe and the heavier, unspoken weight of revelation. The official report from Team 7's mission to the Land of Waves lay open on his desk, its dry, factual prose FLI. Veil over the incredible events it described. Hatake Kakashi stood before the desk, his single visible eye betraying a weariness that went far beyond physical exhaustion. He had delivered his verbal report, and now silence reigned. A profound and unsettling quiet that was only broken by the soft bubbling of the old Hokage's pipe. Seated to Hiruzen's right were his former teammates, Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Udatane. The village elders whose faces were maps of wrinkled parchment, etched with decades of political maneuvering and hard-won battles. Their expressions were grim, a mixture of disbelief and deep-seated concern. Opposite them, half hidden in the shadows that the late afternoon sun could not banish, sat Shimura Danzo. His face was a stoic mask, but the single, predatory eye he wasn't covered by bandages gleamed with a cold, calculating light. The gnarled hand resting on the head of his cane was the only part of him that betrayed any tension, its knuckles white. A beam of pure energy, Kaharu finally said, her voice dry as autumn leaves. One that boiled the ocean and left a bottomless pit. You stand by this account, Kakashi. I do, Kakashi replied, his tone unwavering. He had replayed the moment 1,000 times in his mind, searching for any sign of genjutsu or misinterpretation. He had found none. Sasuke's Sharingan confirmed what I saw. There was no chakra involved. Not in the traditional sense. It was something else. Something vast. And the boy offered no explanation. Homura pressed, leaning forward. He simply manifested the power of a god and expected no questions to be asked. Naruto is discreet. Kakashi chose his words carefully. He called it a little bit of his full power. I believe he was being sincere. The demonstration was meant to intimidate Gado's forces. And it was brutally effective. He showed immense restraint. Danzo let out a soft, rasping chuckle, a sound like stones grinding together. Restraint. A Jinchuriki who can call down the stars is not a demonstration of restraint, Kakashi. It is a declaration. The question is, to whom is he declaring it? He is a loyal shinobi of Konoha, Hiruzen interjected, his voice firm, though his eyes were troubled. He removed his pipe from his lips, his gaze fixed on the report. He had failed the boy. For 12 years, he had allowed Naruto to live as an outcast, a pariah, all while a power beyond his comprehension grew within him. He had mistaken the boy's silence for simplicity, his calm for vacancy. He had seen the vessel, the Kyuubi's container, and missed the universe swirling inside. Loyalty is a conditioned response, Hiruzen, Danzo countered, his voice smooth and dangerous. It must be nurtured, guided, and, when necessary, enforced. This power cannot be left to the whims of a child. It must be controlled. It must be wielded for the good of the village. He is not a weapon. Danzo, Hiruzen's voice was sharp, a rare flash of the anger that had earned him T. He moniker, the professor, and the god of shinobi. He is the most powerful weapon this world has ever seen. Danzo retorted, striking the floor with his cane. More powerful than the firsts would release. More devastating than a tailed beast bomb. A weapon that does not know it is a weapon is a danger to itself and everyone around it. Give him to me. Root will strip away his sentimentality, his attachments. We will hone him, shape him into the ultimate protector of Konoha. You will do no such thing, Hiruzen said, his voice dropping to a low growl. You will not touch him. He is a genin of this village. A member of Team 7 under the command of Hitaki Kakashi. That is final. The tension in the room was a physical force, a crushing pressure that made the air feel thin. Kakashi remained silent, a pawn in a game of titans. He knew what Danzo was capable of, the darkness that festered in the roots of the village. He also knew that Hiruzen, for all his wisdom and power, was often too soft, too slow to act. And Naruto was something else entirely. He was not a piece to be moved on their board. He was the board itself. The Chunin exams are approaching, Kaharu said, skillfully deflecting the confrontation. It is a joint effort with Suna this year. All the great villages will be sending their best. It is an opportunity to display our strength, to reassure our allies and intimidate our enemies after the Uchiha clans decline. And you propose to enter the boy? Homura asked, his eyes wide. To reveal such a power on a stage like that. It would be madness. It would turn every eye in the world upon us. It would invite conflict. Or, Danzo mused, his single eye fixed on Hiruzen, it would quell it. The fear of absolute power is the greatest deterrent of all. Let them see a fraction of what Konoha holds. Let them whisper in fear of the star child of the leaf. It would buy us years of peace. Hiruzen sighed, the weight of his office, of his entire life, pressing down on him. Danzo's logic was twisted, but it held a certain brutal appeal. The other villages were growing restless. Kumo was flexing its military might, Iwa was still bitter over the last war, and Hiri was a chaotic mess of civil war and rebellion. A demonstration of overwhelming power could stabilize the entire continent. But at what cost to the boy's soul? I will speak with Naruto, Hiruzen said finally. I will gauge his maturity, his intentions. The decision to enter the Chunin exams rests with the team's Jonin instructor. It is your choice, Kakashi. Every eye in the room turned to the silver-haired Jonin. Kakashi felt the pressure of their collective gaze. He thought of Sasuke, consumed by his desire for revenge and his desperate need to surpass his enigmatic teammate. He thought of Sakura, her potential shackled by her schoolgirl crush. And he thought of Naruto, a being of cosmic scale trying to navigate the petty squabbles of mortals. Perhaps the structure of the exams, the challenges and the confrontations, was exactly what they needed. I will recommend them for the exam, Kakashi said, his voice clear and steady. All three of them. The days leading up to the Chunin exams were filled with a nervous energy that permeated all of Konoha. For Team 7, that energy manifested in distinctly different ways. Sasuke trained with a feverish intensity, pushing his body to the breaking point. Every lunge, every fireball jutsu, every rotation of his Sharingan was fueled by a single, burning thought, Naruto. The image of the stars being commanded by his teammate was burned into his memory. A constant reminder of the chasm that separated them. He no longer saw Naruto as a rival, he saw him as a mountain to be conquered, an impossible peak that he had to summit or die trying. His ambition had become a monomania, a dark fire that was slowly consuming him. Sakura found herself adrift. Her affection for Sasuke was as strong as ever, but it was now tinged with a deep sense of inadequacy. She watched him train himself into exhaustion, and she watched Naruto move with an effortless perfection that defied explanation. She was the weak link, the anchor holding them back. She redoubled her own training, focusing on her chakra control and genjutsu, but it felt like trying to bridge an ocean with a handful of pebbles. Her confusion was a constant companion. She was afraid of Naruto's power, awed by it, and strangely, inexplicably, drawn to it. He was no longer the loudmouthed prankster from the academy. He was a quiet storm, a silent god walking among them, and she didn't know how to speak to him anymore. Naruto, for his part, seemed largely unfazed by the upcoming exams. He spent his time in the village library, devouring scrolls on history, philosophy, and advanced fuinjutsu. The power cosmic had granted him an intellect as vast as his power, and he absorbed information with a frightening speed. He was not studying for the exam, he was studying humanity. He was trying to understand the intricate dance of politics, ambition, love, and hatred that drove the tiny, fragile creatures he lived among. He could feel the thoughts and emotions of his teammates as clearly as if they were his own. He felt Sasuke's burning frustration, a supernova of rage and envy contained in a mortal shell. He felt Sakura's swirling vortex of insecurity and affection. He felt their awe and their fear of him. It created a distance, a barrier of his own making. He knew he could bridge it. He could touch their minds, soothe their fears, and explain the nature of his existence. He could tell them about the dying silver alien who had crashed into the forests outside Konoha on the night of his birth, a being of pure energy named Norin. He could tell them how, in a day, hurried act to save his power from a world-devouring tyrant, Norin had merged his essence, the power cosmic, with the nearest compatible vessel, a newborn infant whose own chakra coils were already straining to contain a primordial beast. But he didn't. They wouldn't understand. How could they? He barely understood it himself. He was Naruto Uzumaki, but he was also something more. He was a fusion of human, demon, and cosmic entity. He remembered the silence of the void, the light of a billion galaxies, the crushing loneliness of immortality. To share that would be to break their fragile minds. So he remained silent, an observer in his own life, his loneliness a constant companion. When Kakashi presented them with the application forms for the exam, the tension in the team was palpable. Sasuke snatched his form with a grim determination. Sakura accepted hers with a trembling hand. Naruto simply took his expression serene. It's an all-or-nothing decision, Kakashi said, his eye crinkling in what might have been a smile. The entire team must participate. The first exam starts tomorrow morning at the academy, room 301. Don't be late. He vanished in a swirl of leaves, leaving the three of them alone. Don't get in my way, Sakura, Sasuke said without looking at her, his attention fixed on Naruto. "And you, Dobi, don't you dare hold back in this exam. I want to see what you can really do." Naruto met his gaze, his blue eyes calm and deep as the ocean. "You are not ready to see what I can do, Sasuke. But perhaps, by the end of this, you will be." He turned and walked away, leaving Sasuke clenching his fists, Sakura's heart aching, and the unspoken challenge hanging heavy in the air between them. The atmosphere in room 301 of the academy was a toxic brew of arrogance, anxiety, and bloodlust. Genin from across the elemental nations were crammed into the small classroom, each one sizing up the competition. There were the stoic shinobi from Suna, their faces partially obscured by turbans and face paint. Their gourd-bearing redhead leader radiating a palpable killing intent. There were the brutish ninja from Kiri, their eyes holding a feral glint that spoke of the bloody civil war that had ravaged their homeland. And there were the genin from Konoha's own Rookie 9, a collection of clan heirs and prodigies who looked on with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Team 7's arrival caused a small ripple in the room. Sasuke's Uchiha crest and Sakura's bright pink hair were recognizable, but it was Naruto who drew the most stares. The whispers that had wed him since his return from the wave mission had spread, morphing into outlandish rumors. They said he could command the weather, that he had single-handedly defeated 1,000 men, that he was not human. He ignored the stares, his calm demeanor an island of tranquility in a sea of tension. The proctor for the first exam arrived in a cloud of smoke, a tall, imposing man covered in scars, his face a testament to a life of violence and interrogation. "All right, you baby-faced degenerates, listen up." Ibiki Morino's voice was a gravelly roar that commanded immediate silence. "I am the proctor for the first stage of this exam. And I make the rules. There will be no fighting without permission. Anyone who steps out of line will be failed immediately. Now, take a number and find your assigned seat." The exam was, as Naruto had already deduced from the psychic chatter in the room, a written test on information gathering. The questions were absurdly difficult, far beyond the scope of a genin's education. The real test was to cheat without getting caught by the Chunin proctors scattered around the room, who watched with eagle-like intensity. Naruto sat at his desk, the blank test paper before him. He didn't need to cheat. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, expanding his consciousness just enough to encompass the room. Information flooded his mind. He saw the answers reflect. Ted in the glasses of a nerdy genin in the back row. He heard the whispered signals of a team from Kumo. He felt the subtle chakra fluctuations of a Suna puppet master manipulating a tiny camera. He then perceived the answers written on the master sheet in Ibiki's pocket. The thoughts, the fears, the desperate calculations of every person in the room were an open book to him. He picked up his pencil and began to write. His movements fluid and unhurried. He didn't just write the answers. He wrote the elegant, complex theories behind them, extrapolating on the provided questions with insights that would have made a seasoned cryptographer weep with joy. He filled the page with perfect, precise calligraphy, his mind a silent ocean while all around him, lesser minds splashed and struggled in the shallows. Ibiki watched him from the front of the room. He had been briefed on the Uzumaki boy. The Hokage had given him a special warning: do not provoke him. But Ibiki was a master of psychological warfare. He prided himself on his ability to break any mind, to find the cracks in any facade. He focused his killing intent on Naruto, a suffocating pressure honed through countless interrogations. Designed to make grown men soil themselves. He expected the boy to flinch, to sweat, to show some sign of fear. Instead, Naruto paused in his writing, lifted his head, and met Ibiki's gaze. His blue eyes were not defiant or afraid. They were amused, and in them, Ibiki saw a reflection of his own soul, his own fears, his own deepest insecurities, laid bare. The killing intent he was projecting was not just blocked. It was reflected back at him, magnified 1,000-fold. It felt as if the entire weight of the universe was pressing down on him, judging him, and finding him wanting. Ibiki stumbled back a step, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He broke eye contact, his heart hammering in his chest. What in the name of the first Hokage was this child? The exam continued. Genin were caught and eliminated. Their dreams dashed against the rocks of Ibiki's test. Sasuke used his Sharingan to copy the pencil movements of the person in front of him. Sakura, with her perfect memory, had actually managed to answer most of the questions on her own. Finally, the time came for the 10th and final question. Ibiki explained the rules with sadistic glee. It was a choice. They could choose not to answer, and their entire team would fail. Or they could choose to answer, and if they got it wrong, they would be barred from ever taking the Chunin exams again. It was a brutal psychological trap, designed to weed out those without the resolve to risk everything. Panic spread through the room. Hands were raised. Teams were disqualified. The pressure mounted. Sasuke sat with a grim certainty. Sakura was a bundle of nerves. Then, just as she was about to raise her hand to save Sasuke from potential failure, Naruto's voice cut through the tension. "Don't underestimate me," he said, not to anyone in particular. But his voice carried a quiet conviction that silenced the room. "I don't quit, and I don't run. I'm not afraid of your question. So go on, ask it. I'll be sitting here all day if I have to." His confidence was infectious. It was a spark that ignited the flickering embers of courage in the other genin. One by one, they lowered their hands. Ibiki watched, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his scarred face. "Your decision," he said, "is to accept the 10th question." He scanned the room, seeing the newfound determination in their eyes. "Excellent. Then for those of you who remain, the first exam is over. You all pass." The collective sigh of relief was followed by a wave of confusion. Ibiki explained the true purpose of the test, to measure their ability to gather our information and their resolve under pressure. Just as he finished, the window shattered inward, and a woman with spiky purple hair and a wild, manic grin made her entrance, unfurling a large banner behind her. "All right, you maggots, listen up. I'm your proctor for the second exam, Mitarashi Anko. And this is where the fun begins." The Forest of Death was a place that lived up to its name. Designated as Training Ground 44, it was a massive, circular forest enclosed by a tall metal fence, its gates locked and guarded. The trees were ancient and gargantuan, their dense canopy plunging the forest floor into a perpetual twilight. The air was thick and humid, buzzing with the sound of oversized insects and the cries of unseen predators. The very ground seemed to vibrate with a primal, malevolent energy. Anko stood before the assembled genin, a stack of release forms in her hand. "Before we begin," she said, her tongue flicking out to lick her lips in a serpentine gesture, "you all have to sign these. They basically say that if you die in here, it's not my fault." The grim reality of the exam settled upon the rookies. This wasn't a test of knowledge or wits. This was a test of survival. Anko explained the rules. Each team would be given either a heaven or an earth scroll. They had 5 days to make their way to the tower at the center of the forest, and they had to do it with both a heaven and an earth scroll. The only way to get the scroll they needed was to take it from another team. By any means necessary. This is a free-for-all, Anko grinned. You'll be fighting for your lives against the other teams and against this forest itself. Try not to get eaten. As she spoke, her eyes scanned the crowd, and her gaze fell upon Naruto. A strange sensation prickled at the back of her neck, right where Orochimaru had branded her with his cursed seal years ago. The seal, normally a dormant source of pain and dark chakra, began to throb with a faint, almost fearful energy. It was reacting to something. To someone. She looked at the blonde boy, at his placid expression and the calm, cosmic sea of his eyes, and a shiver that had nothing to do with excitement ran down her spine. He felt wrong, ancient, like the forest itself, but infinitely more dangerous. Team 7 received an Earth Scroll. As they stood before Gate 12, waiting for the signal to start, Sakura was visibly trembling. Sasuke was tense, his hand resting on the hilt of his kunai. Only Naruto seemed relaxed. "Don't worry, Sakura," he said, his voice a soothing balm on her frayed nerves. "I won't let anything happen to you." The promise was so simple, so absolute, that she found herself believing it. The gates opened, and they plunged into the oppressive gloom of the forest. For the first few hours, they moved with caution, Naruto in the lead. His senses, enhanced by the power cosmic, were a far more effective detection system than any Byakugan or sensory ninja technique. He guided them around giant, carnivorous plants. steered them clear of the lairs of monstrous beasts, and helped them avoid the paths of other, more aggressive teams. He moved with a quiet, predatory grace that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. Sasuke's frustration grew with every passing minute. This wasn't a team effort. It was the Naruto show. He felt like a child being led by the hand, and he hated it. He needed to prove himself. To show that he was not just a spectator in his own life. His chance came when they were ambushed by a team of genin from the village hidden in the rain. They were skilled, their attacks coordinated. But they were no match for an Uchiha prodigy. Sasuke dispatched them with a brutal efficiency, his Sharingan predicting their every move, his fireball jutsu turning the humid air scorching hot. He stood over their unconscious forms, breathing heavily, a triumphant smirk on his face as he took their heaven scroll. "See," he said, turning to Naruto. "I can handle myself." "I never said you couldn't," Naruto replied calmly, his eyes not on Sasuke, but on the canopy above. "But your use of that large-scale jutsu has just announced our position to everyone within a 5-mile radius. Including the things that are not other genin." As if on cue, a massive gust of wind tore through the trees, a pressure so intense it felt like a physical blow. The air grew cold, thick with a stench of rot and old blood. A presence, ancient and deeply malevolent, descended upon them. Sakura screamed as a giant serpent, easily 50 feet long, crashed through the undergrowth, its eyes yellow slits of predatory hunger. But it wasn't the snake that was the source of the terrifying pressure. It was the figure standing atop its head. A pale-skinned individual with long, black hair and golden eyes that were slit like a snake's. They wore the headband of the village hidden in the grass, but the sheer, suffocating killing intent they radiated was unlike anything the genin had ever experienced. Well, the person hissed. Their voice a silken, sibilant whisper that seemed to slither directly into their minds. "What have we here? An Uchiha? How delightful. And the Kyuubi's vessel." The figure, Orochimaru, one of the legendary Sannin and a traitor to Konoha, focused his attention on Sasuke, his tongue darting out to lick his lips. "I've been looking for you, Sasuke-kun. You have such potential, such delicious hatred." Orochimaru's killing intent washed over them, a tidal wave of pure malice. Sakura was paralyzed with fear. Even Sasuke, for all his bravado, found himself trembling, his body refusing to obey his commands. But the wave of killing intent broke harmlessly against Naruto. He stood perfectly still, his expression unchanged, a rock in a raging river. "And you," Orochimaru's snake-like eyes narrowed, turning their full, terrifying focus onto Naruto. "There is something different about you. Your power signature, it is immense. It eclipses the Kyuubis entirely. What are you, little boy?" Naruto didn't answer. Instead, he met Orochimaru's gaze, and he unleashed a fraction of his own presence. It was not killing intent. It was something far older, far more profound. It was the silent, crushing pressure of the infinite void. It was the cold, indifferent weight of a billion dying stars. It was the absolute, unassailable reality of entropy. Orochimaru, for the first time in his long, monstrous life, felt true fear. It was not the fear of death. He had conquered that long ago. It was a deeper, more existential terror. It was the fear of utter, absolute insignificance. He felt like a microbe staring into the heart of a supernova. His jutsu, his ambitions, his quest for immortality, it was all reduced to meaningless dust in the face of this thing. He saw, for a fleeting, terrifying moment, the truth in Naruto's eyes. He saw galaxies being born and dying. He saw the curvature of space-time. He saw the beginning and the end of everything. His scientific curiosity warred with his instinct for self-preservation. He had to have Sasuke's body, the Sharingan was key to his plans. But this other boy, he was the true prize. To understand him, to dissect him, to steal that power for himself, that was a goal worthy of a god. With a shriek of combined frustration and terror, Orochimaru lunged, his neck stretching to an impossible length, his mouth opening wide to swallow his prey. But his target wasn't Naruto. It was Sasuke. He moved with blinding speed, but Naruto was faster. He appeared in front of Sasuke, his hand raised. He didn't strike. He simply placed his palm on Orochimaru's forehead. There was no explosion, no flash of light. Just a silent, cosmic hum. Orochimaru's body went rigid, his golden eyes widened in a rictus of agony and disbelief. He felt the power cosmic surge into him. Not as an attack, but as an analysis. It mapped his DNA, his chakra pathways, his twisted soul. It saw every jutsu he had ever learned, every life he had ever stolen, every dark secret he held. And it judged him. Naruto pushed, and Orochimaru was sent flying backward, crashing through a dozen ancient trees before coming to a stop in a crumpled heap. He forced himself to his feet, his body screaming in protest. He clutched his head, his mind reeling from the psychic intrusion. "Stay away from my teammates," Naruto said, his voice quiet, yet carrying the absolute authority of a law of physics. Orochimaru stared at him, a mixture of hatred, fear, and an all-consuming obsession in his eyes. He had to have that power. He had to understand it. But he knew he couldn't take it now. He performed a hand sign, and his body dissolved into a torrent of snakes, slithering away into the undergrowth. But not before he made one last, desperate move. A single snake shot out, faster than the eye could see, and bit Sasuke on the neck, leaving behind 3 black tomo, the cursed seal of heaven. Sasuke screamed and collapsed, clutching his neck as the dark chakra flooded his system. Naruto was at his side in an instant, his hand glowing with a soft, silver light. He placed his hand over the seal, not to remove it, but to contain it. He could feel Orochimaru's malevolent will encoded within it, a parasite designed to corrupt and control. He wrapped it in a layer of cosmic energy, a cage of starlight that would slow its spread, for now. Sakura rushed to Sasuke's side, her face pale with terror. As she tended to him, the forest around them came alive with sound. Not the sound of animals, but the sound of music. A haunting, discordant melody played on a flute. From the shadows emerged 3 figures, their headbands bearing the symbol of Otogakur, the village hidden in the sound. Zaku, with his air pressure blasting arms. Dosu, with his melody arm gauntlet. And in the center, a red-haired girl with a foul-mouthed smirk and a bone flute held to her lips. Chiyuya. Well, what do we have here? Chiyuya sneered, lowering her flute. Looks like Orochimaru-sama softened you up for us. Hand over your scroll, you leaf-loving scum, and we might just let you live. Naruto stood up, placing himself between the sound nin and his unconscious teammates. You're working for him, he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Smart boy, Chiyuya mocked. Now, are you going to give us the scroll, or do I have to play you a song that will make your brains leak out of your ears? Your master has already fled, Naruto said. I suggest you do the same. Chiyuya's eyes narrowed. Nobody talks trash about Orochimaru-sama. I'm going to enjoy this. She raised the flute to her lips and began to play. It was a powerful, complex genjutsu. The sound waves were designed to attack the victim's mind directly, bypassing the ears and creating an illusion of being bound by invisible wires. Their flesh slowly melting from their bones. It was a terrifyingly effective technique. But Naruto's mind was not a place of flesh and neurons. It was a gateway to the cosmos. Chiyuya's sound-based genjutsu washed over him. It didn't find a consciousness it could manipulate. It found an ocean of infinite awareness. Her notes, instead of creating an illusion, were absorbed, analyzed, and understood in a fraction of a microsecond. And then, Naruto sent something back. He didn't use a jutsu. He didn't even move. He simply resonated with the sound waves she was producing, using her own melody as a carrier wave. He opened a microscopic, infinitesimal crack in the doorway to his mind and let her peek inside. Chiyuya's world dissolved. She was no longer in the forest of death. She was floating in a silent, black void. Below her, a star the size of a mountain was being born, a swirling vortex of incandescent gas and cosmic dust. She heard, not with her ears, but with her very soul, the music it made, a deep, resonant hum that was both chaotic and perfectly harmonious. It was the sound of creation. Then, the perspective shifted. She was watching a galaxy spin, a pinwheel of 100 billion suns. Its spiral arms singing a chorus of unimaginable complexity. She saw nebulae that looked like celestial water paintings, heard the sharp, percussive crackle of a pulsar, felt the slow, mournful bass note of a black hole warping the fabric of space. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was everything. Her own music, her demonic flute technique, felt like a child bee hanging on a pot compared to this symphony of existence. Her arrogance, her pride in her own skills, was shattered into a million pieces. She was nothing. Her art was nothing. The vision lasted for less than a second of real time. But in her mind, an eternity had passed. She was abruptly back in the forest, stumbling backward, her flute falling from her nerveless fingers. She was gasping for air, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. Her teammates, Zaku and Dosu, were looking at her in confusion. They had heard her music stop, but they had no idea what had just happened to her. She stared at the blonde boy, who hadn't moved a muscle. His expression was still calm, but his eyes held the memory of everything she had just seen. He hadn't attacked her. He had educated her. He had shown her what true sound, what true music, really was. What did you do to me? She whispered, her voice trembling. I let you listen, Naruto replied simply. Her teammates, seeing her distress, charged forward. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto sent 2 compressed spheres of cosmic energy, no larger than marbles, flying through the air. They struck Zaku and Dosu in the chest, not with enough force to kill, but enough to knock them unconscious and shatter their chakra networks for the next few hours. Chiyuya stood alone, shaken to her core. She looked at Naruto, at this boy who held the universe in his mind. And she felt a confusing cocktail of emotions: fear, awe, and a desperate, burning curiosity. He could have killed her. He could have destroyed her mind. Instead, he had given her a gift, a terrifying, beautiful gift. He had shown her a power she never knew existed, a new pinnacle of her art to strive for. Naruto bent down and picked up the heaven scroll from the unconscious Rain Nin. He then turned and began to walk away, supporting Sakura, who was in turn trying to support the groaning, semi-conscious form of Sasuke. He didn't even give Chiyuya a backward glance. Wait, she called out, her voice raw. Naruto paused but didn't turn around. What are you? She asked. Naruto was silent for a moment. Then, without looking back, he said, a shinobi of the hidden leaf. He and his team disappeared into the gloom of the forest, leaving Chiyuya alone with her unconscious teammates, her fallen flute, and a mind that was now haunted by the sound of the stars. The Chunin exams, Orochimaru. The scroll, none of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was him. The boy who played the music of the cosmos. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Politics of Power. The 2-W'er at the center of the Forest of Death was meant to be a sanctuary, a place of reprieve after 5 days of brutal, unrelenting survival. For the teams that limped through its gates, bruised, bloodied, and clutching their precious scrolls. It was supposed to signify the end of the ordeal. For Team 7, it felt more like the eye of a hurricane. They arrived on the 3rd day, a full 48 hours ahead of schedule. A feat that did not go unnoticed by the Chunin proctors stationed there. Their entrance was not triumphant. It was a somber, silent procession. Naruto, looking as pristine and untouched as he had at the start, half carried a still feverish Sasuke, whose skin was pale and slick with sweat, the black tomo of the cursed seal, a venomous brand upon his neck. Sakura walked beside them, her face etched with exhaustion and worry, her eyes darting nervously as if expecting an attack at any moment. They were ushered into a waiting room, where they were met by their sensei. Kakashi's single visible eye widened almost imperceptibly as he took in Sasuke's condition. He knelt, his fingers gently probing the area around the seal. A flicker of his own chakra made contact with the malevolent energy, and he recoiled as if burned. Orochimaru, Kakashi breathed, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. He looked from the cursed Uchiha to the perfectly calm Jinchuriki. Report. Naruto gave a concise, dispassionate account of the events. He detailed the encounter with the Grass Nin, the overwhelming presence of the Sannin, the battle of wills, and the final, desperate attack that had branded Sasuke. He mentioned the subsequent encounter with the Sound Team, though he strategically omitted the cosmic symphony he had shared with Chiyuya, simply stating that he had incapacitated them using a sound-based genjutsu. Kakashi listened, his gaze fixed on Naruto. A sound-based genjutsu. Naruto had never displayed such a skill. It was yet another piece of an ever-growing, incomprehensible puzzle. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the boy was lying by omission. The truth was likely far more terrifying than the fiction. "I'll take Sasuke to the Hokage," Kakashi said, his voice grim. He knew a sealing jutsu was required, a powerful one, to contain the cursed seal's influence. "You two rest. The third exam preliminaries won't begin until all the successful teams have arrived." As Kakashi left with Sasuke, a new figure entered the room. It was Anko. Her usual manic energy was gone, replaced by a somber, almost fearful gravity. The faint throbbing of her own cursed seal had not subsided. It was a constant, low-level hum of terror that resonated with the memory of her encounter with Naruto at the forest's edge. She had felt his presence engage Orochimaru's, and it was like feeling a tidal wave rise to meet a puddle. "Uzumaki," she said, her voice surprisingly soft. She walked over, her eyes fixed on him, searching for some sign of the monster she felt lurking beneath his skin. She found nothing but a calm, unnerving stillness. "The Hokage wishes to see you. Alone." Sakura looked from Anko to Naruto, a fresh wave of anxiety washing over her. She opened her mouth to protest, to insist on going with him, but Naruto gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. The message was clear: this is not your battle. Naruto followed Anko rough the sterile corridors of the tower, their footsteps echoing in the silence. She didn't speak, but he could feel her fear, her curiosity, her confusion. He could feel the dark energy of the seal on her neck. A tainted chakra that whispered promises of power at the cost of one's soul. It was a crude, brutal form of energy manipulation, a butcher's work compared to the elegant, universal symphony of the power cosmic. They arrived at a heavily guarded room at the top of the tower. Hiruzen Sarutobi was there, along with the two elders, Homura and Koharu. The air was thick with tension. Danzo was not present, a small mercy for which Naruto was grateful. The old warhawk's mind was a cesspool of paranoia and ambition that was physically unpleasant to be near. "Naruto," Hiruzen began, his voice heavy. "Anko has informed us of Orochimaru's presence in the forest. Kakashi is dealing with Sasuke now. I need you to tell me exactly what happened." Naruto repeated his report, using the same carefully chosen words. He knew they were dissecting his every syllable, searching for inconsistencies, for the true measure of his power. "You drove him off?" Koharu asked, her sharp eyes narrowed in disbelief. "You, a genin, drove off one of the legendary Sannin." "I did not engage him in combat," Naruto corrected her gently. "I merely made it clear that to attack my team would be unwise." "Unwise how?" Homura pressed. "What did you do to him?" Naruto met the old man's gaze. "I showed him a glimpse of the truth. I find that most ambitions, when held up to the vastness of reality, wither and die." The elders exchanged a look of frustration. The boy's answers were maddeningly cryptic, yet delivered with an unshakable confidence that made them impossible to dismiss. "Naruto," Hiruzen said, steepling his fingers. "A message arrived this morning. From Iwagakure. It was delivered by one of the Tsuchikage's personal hawks, a diplomatic channel reserved for matters of the utmost urgency." He slid a scroll across the table. "It is a summons. For you." Naruto didn't touch the scroll. He didn't need to. He could already feel the faint, lingering chakra of its sender, and he could sense the intent behind the words written on it. "They felt it," he stated simply. Hiruzen's eyes widened. "Felt what?" "The energy I released in the land of waves. And again, the presence I projected to deter Orochimaru. Their sensory core is more advanced than you give them credit for. They registered two anomalous energy signatures originating within the land of fire. They do not know what it is, but they know it is powerful. And they know it is centered on Konoha. They are afraid." The three old leaders of Konoha sat in stunned silence. They had been trying to piece together the geopolitical puzzle, and the boy had just laid the entire board bare before them. Of course, the other villages would have detected something. An energy release of that magnitude was like a lighthouse beam in the darkness. "The Tsuchikage, Lord Onoki, has requested your presence in Iwagakure to discuss Konoha's development of new weaponry in violation of inter-village treaties," Hiruzen read from the scroll, his voice laced with irony. "It is, of course, a pretext. He wants to see the weapon for himself. He wants to measure you. This is an unprecedented crisis," Koharu said, her voice tight with alarm. "To refuse is to admit we are hiding something, an act of aggression. To accept is to send our Jinchuriki, our most valuable asset, into the heart of a rival village. A village that still harbors a deep resentment towards Konoha, and specifically towards the legacy of the fourth Hokage. It is a trap, Homura stated flatly. They will try to capture him, dissect him, or assassinate him. No, Naruto said, his calm voice cutting through their panicked discussion. They are too proud for assassination and too cautious for a capture attempt. This is an assessment. They want to know if I am a threat they can manage or a force they must submit to. It is a political maneuver, not a military one. Hiruzen looked at the boy, at the 13-year-old who spoke of geopolitics with the weary wisdom of a centuries-old cage. He had made a decision the moment Kakashi had brought Sasuke in, a decision that his council was now forcing him to justify. I have already sent my reply. I have accepted their request. Hiruzen, have you lost your mind? Koharu gasped. We will send him with a full Jonin escort, Hiruzen continued, ignoring her. Asuma, Kurenai, and Guy. A show of strength. No, Naruto said again, his voice gentle but firm. That would be a mistake. To send a heavy escort would signal fear. It would validate their paranoia that I am a weapon being guarded. You will send me with a single chaperone. A political specialist. Someone who can navigate their courts while I handle the Tsuchikage. Hiruzen stared at him. The boy's logic was flawless. It was the exact conclusion he had come to himself. But to hear it from Naruto's own lips was both reassuring and deeply unsettling. And who would you suggest for such a role? Hitaki Kakashi, Naruto replied without hesitation. He is known throughout the nations as the son of the White Fang and the student of the fourth Hokage. His presence would be an insult to Iwa's pride, but it would also be a message. It would tell them that we are not afraid of their old grudges. That the legacy of the Yellow Flash still protects this village. It is a subtle but powerful piece of psychological warfare. The old Hokage leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Danzo had called the boy a weapon. He was wrong. Naruto wasn't a weapon. He was the hand that wielded it. The journey to the land of Earth was a stark and unforgiving one. The lush, green forests of their homeland gradually gave way to a rugged, windswept landscape of rock and stone. The mountains here were not the gentle, rolling hills of the land of fire, they were jagged, brutal things. Thrusting up from the earth like broken teeth. The wind was a constant, abrasive presence, carrying with it the taste of dust and the chill of high altitudes. Kakashi, true to form, spent most of the journey with his nose buried in his little orange book, though Naruto knew he was hyper-aware of their surroundings. They traveled in a comfortable silence, two solitary figures moving through a vast, empty landscape. You're taking this all very calmly, Kakashi said one evening as they made camp in the lee of a massive rock formation that resembled a clenched fist. Fear is a product of uncertainty, Naruto replied, gazing up at the star-dusted sky. The stars here were different, clearer, unpolluted by the humid haze of their homeland. I am not uncertain about the outcome of this meeting. HMPH. Kakashi noted, not unkindly. Realistic, Naruto corrected. Onoki is old. His power, while considerable, is rooted in the physical manipulation of matter. Dust release is impressive, but it is merely the deconstruction of molecular bonds. It is a crude tool. What he cannot comprehend is power that operates on a more fundamental level. The power to bend space, to manipulate gravity, to rewrite physical law. To him, it is magic. And like all old men confronted with a force they cannot understand, he will react with fear, then anger, then, eventually, a grudging acceptance of his own obsolescence. Kakashi was silent for a long time, watching the firelight flicker across his student's impassive face. Who are you, Naruto? He finally asked, the question that had been haunting him for months. Naruto turned his gaze from the stars to his sensei. His blue eyes seemed to hold the vast, cold emptiness of the space between them. I am the universe's way of ensuring its own survival, he said, the words simple, yet carrying a weight that Kakashi could feel in his soul. This world, this tiny, insignificant ball of rock and water, is abo. To become the epicenter of a conflict that will shake the foundations of reality. I am here to ensure that when the storm comes, there is still a world left to save. Kakashi had no response to that. He simply nodded. a profound and deeply unsettling understanding dawning on him. They were not on a diplomatic mission. They were heralds, announcing the arrival of a new god. Iwagakure, the village hidden in the stones, was a fortress carved from a mountain range. Its buildings were not built, but sculpted from the living rock, connected by a dizzying network of stone bridges and tunnels. It was a city that embodied the spirit of its people, hard, unyielding, and stubborn as the earth itself. As Naruto and Kakashi approached the main gate, they could feel hundreds of eyes upon them, hidden within arrow slits and camouflaged guard posts. The animosity was a palpable force, a low-level hum of resentment that permeated the very air of the village. They were met at the gate by a contingent of Iwa shinobi, their faces grim, their posture rigid. Leading them was a young woman with short, black hair and a confident, almost arrogant smirk. She wore the standard Iwa flak jacket, but she read herself with an air of authority that belied her age. This was Kuretsuchi, granddaughter of the third Tsuchikage. Hitaki Kakashi, she said, her voice sharp and clear, with a slight, mocking lilt. Konoha sends the son of its most hated enemy and the student of ours. A bold choice, or a foolish one. Her eyes, a striking shade of dark pink, slid past Kakashi to land on Naruto. She scanned him from head to toe, her gaze analytical and dismissive. And this must be the new weapon. You're shorter than I expected. And you're more pleasant than the rumors suggested, Naruto replied, his voice perfectly even. They made you sound almost charming. Kuretsuchi's smirk widened into a genuine grin. Oh, I like this one. He's got some spine. She turned, gesturing for them to follow. Come on. Gramps is waiting. He's been in a foul mood all week. This should be fun. She led them through the stone corridors of the city, her gait a confident swagger. The citizens of Iowa stopped and stared as they passed, their faces a mixture of curiosity and open hostility. Whispers of White Fang and Yellow Flash followed Kakashi like ghosts. Don't mind them, Kuretsuchi said over her shoulder. We have long memories here in the rocks. We don't forget our grudges easily. A flaw that often leads to stagnation, Naruto commented quietly. Kuretsuchi stopped and turned, her eyes narrowing. What was that? A nation that lives in the past has no future, Naruto elaborated, meeting her gaze without flinching. Grudges are anchors. They keep you from moving forward. She stared at him for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. It looked like surprise, as if she had expected a mindless weapon and had found a philosopher instead. You talk big for a genin, she said, but the mocking edge was gone from her voice, replaced by a grudging curiosity. They arrived at the Tsuchikage's office, a vast, circular chamber at the highest point of the village. The walls were unadorned stone, and the only furniture was a large, solid rock desk. Behind it, floating a few inches off the ground, sat a tiny, ancient man with a large red nose and a triangular beard. Onoki, the third Tsuchikage, a man known throughout the world as Onoki of both scales, for his unwavering, stubborn nature. His eyes, old and tired but still sharp as flint, were fixed on Naruto. The pressure in the room was immense. Onoki was releasing his killing intent, a heavy, grinding force that felt like being slowly crushed under the weight of a mountain. Kakashi tensed, his hand moving towards his kunai pouch. Naruto, however, seemed completely unaffected. He simply stood there, his hands in his pockets, his expression one of polite interest. He met the old cage's gaze, and slowly, subtly, he began to push back. He didn't release killing intent. He did something far more effective. He began to manipulate the gravity in the room. It started small, a faint pressure in their ears. The dust motes in. The air seemed to hang for a fraction of a second longer before settling. Then, it grew. Kuretsuchi felt her feet become heavy, as if she were suddenly wearing lead boots. The stone desk groaned, AF. Ain't cracking sound echoing in the silent room. Onoki's eyes widened. He, of all people, was a master of gravity. His flight jutsu was a precise manipulation of his own weight. He felt the fundamental force he had spent a lifetime mastering being wrested from his control. The air around him grew thick, heavy, like water. He was struggling to stay afloat, the strain causing beads of sweat to pop out on his ancient brow. He felt like a swimmer caught in a current, being dragged down into an abyss. Your reputation precedes you, Lord Tsuchikage, Naruto said, his voice calm and conversational, as if he didn't notice the immense battle of wills taking place. They say your will is as unbending as the stone of these mountains. He took a step forward, and the gravitational pressure increased tenfold. The stone desk cracked, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across its surface. But even mountains can be turned to dust. With a final, agonizing groan, the solid rock desk collapsed in on itself, crumbling into a pile of gravel and sand. Onoki gasped and dropped to the floor, the strain of fighting the oppressive gravity too much for his old body. The pressure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The room was silent, save for the Tsuchikage's ragged breathing. Kuretsuchi stared at the pile of dust that had once been her grandfather's desk, then at the blonde boy who stood calmly in the center of the room. Her mind was reeling. He hadn't used hand signs. He hadn't flared his chakra. He had simply willed it to happen. He had defeated her grandfather, a Kage renowned as the most powerful shinobi in the world, without throwing a single punch. He had done it with a look and a few quiet words. This wasn't a weapon. It was a force of nature. Onoki slowly picked himself up, his back groaning in protest. He looked at Naruto, and the anger and suspicion in his eyes were gone, replaced by a deep, profound fear and a dawning, horrified respect. "What are you?" he rasped, the question an echo of Orochimaru's. "Of Tayuya's. I am a shinobi of Konoha," Naruto replied, the answer always the same, yet its meaning growing with every repetition. "And I have come, as requested, to discuss the matter of inter-village treaties." He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Shall we begin?" Kuretsuchi watched him, her politician's mind racing, recalibrating every assumption she had ever made about the balance of power in the world. Her initial assessment had been laughably, dangerously wrong. She had come here expecting to test a weapon, to gauge its capabilities. Instead, she had witnessed a god holding a conversation. Her grandfather had wanted to measure the boy. But it was Iwagakure, and the entire world, that had just been weighed, and found wanting. And in that moment, a new, radical ambition began to form in her mind. Iwa could not fight this power. It could not hope to control it. But perhaps it could align with it. Her personal attraction, born from his sharp wit at the gate, was now fused with a strategic fascination that was far more potent. This boy was not just a kingmaker. He was the entire game. And she wanted, more than anything, to learn how to play. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Resonance of a Tailed Beast. The political shockwave of Naruto's visit to Iwagakure did not so much ripple as it did detonate across the elemental nations. Official communiques were, as always, models of diplomatic understatement. Iwagakure announced that its concerns regarding Konoha's adherence to post-war treaties had been satisfactorily addressed. Konoha, in turn, released a statement praising the Tsuchikage's wisdom and forward-thinking leadership, declaring a new era of mutual understanding and potential cooperation. To the uninitiated, it sounded like a successful, if somewhat dry, diplomatic summit. To the intelligence networks of the great shinobi villages, it was the geopolitical equivalent of a mountain range vanishing overnight. The truth, as it always does, trickled out in whispers and classified reports. Kumogakure's top sensory ninja reported that the Tsuchikage, a man whose chakra signature had been a constant, stubborn presence for over half a century, had been completely suppressed, silenced for a full 10 minutes during the meeting. Kurigakure's spies spoke of a shattered desk, not broken by a physical blow, but disintegrated into its component molecules. The most telling piece of intel came from Suna. A merchant with deep Iwa connections reported that Kuretsuchi, the Tsuchikage's famously arrogant granddaughter, had been seen observing the Konoha genin with an expression not of rivalry, but of rapt, almost reverent, attention. In Konoha, the reaction was one of stunned, terrified jubilation. Hiruzen Sarutobi found himself presiding over a council that was, for the first time in decades, utterly speechless. The report Kakashi had submitted was concise and terrifyingly vague, speaking of a demonstration of strategic will and gravitational pressure. The elders, Homura and Kaharu, who had vehemently opposed the mission, were now its most ardent supporters, speaking of Naruto not as a risk, but as Konoha's ultimate diplomatic tool. a living embodiment of the speak softly and carry a big stick philosophy, except his stick could crumble mountains. Danzo Shimura was conspicuously silent during these meetings. His spies in Iowa had given him a more detailed, more chilling account. They had described a power that was not ninjutsu, genjutsu, or taijutsu. It was something primal, something that bent the laws of physics as a potter bends clay. His ambition, once a simple desire to control the Kyuubi's power, had now metastasized into something far grander and more terrifying. He no longer wanted to control a weapon of mass destruction. He wanted to possess the power of creation itself. His agents en route were given new, secret directives: observe the Uzumaki boy, understand the source of his power, and find a way to replicate it. Or transfer it. Naruto himself was oblivious to the political maelstrom he had created. Or rather, he was aware of it, but found it profoundly uninteresting. The machinations of mortals were like the complex but ultimately predictable patterns of weather. He could see the storm fronts of ambition and the high-pressure systems of fear, but he felt no compulsion to interfere. He had done what was necessary to ensure the village's short-term security. Now, his attention was being drawn elsewhere. It had begun subtly, a few days after his return. A faint hum at the edge of his perception. A psychic vibration that was neither sound nor thought. It was a feeling, an emotional broadcast of pure, unadulterated joy. It was faint, like a distant melody caught on the wind, but it was persistent. It felt familiar. It had the same fundamental frequency as the Kyuubi's chakra, that raw, primal life energy of a tailed beast, but it was fundamentally different in its expression. The Kyuubi's energy, when he chose to feel it, was a raging inferno of hatred and resentment, a chaotic symphony of rage born from centuries of being hunted and sealed. This, however, was a bright, soaring melody. It was the feeling of sunlight on wings, of laughter echoing through a forest, of boundless, innocent freedom. He extended his cosmic senses, following the thread of this strange song. It led him southeast, across the land of fire, over the border into a small, unnamed nation of dense forests and countless rivers, and pinpointed its origin at a single, immovable point, Takigakure. The village hidden by a waterfall. The power cosmic, his silent, omniscient partner, offered a clinical analysis. It was a massive, stable concentration of unique life force energy, intertwined with a secondary human consciousness, a Jinchuriki, but one whose relationship with their beast was not one of prisoner and jailer, but something far more harmonious. He sat on the head of the fourth Hokage on the monument, looking out over the village as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley. The song was stronger today, a clear, beautiful note in the psychic noise of the world. It was a call, and for the first time since he had integrated the power cosmic, he felt a genuine flicker of curiosity. A desire to understand. He found the third Hokage in his office, long after the sun had set, poring over scrolls under the light of a single lamp. Hiruzen looked up, his old eyes weary but sharp. Naruto. It is late. Is something wrong? I need to go to Takigakure, Naruto stated. Dispensing with pleasantries. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow, putting down his brush. Indeed. And for what purpose? Have they also requested a demonstration of Konoha's diplomatic prowess? There is a Jinchuriki there. Naruto said. The seven tails. I can feel them. Our energies. They are similar. I wish to meet them. The Hokage's expression shifted from curiosity to intense concentration. A Jinchuriki reaching out to another was an unheard-of phenomenon. The villages guarded their tailed beasts with a paranoid jealousy. But Naruto was not a normal Jinchuriki. You can feel them. From this distance. It is less a feeling and more a resonance, Naruto explained, struggling for the right words. Their spirit is broadcasting a powerful emotion. It is one of joy and a desire for connection. It is loud. Hiruzen leaned back, his mind racing through 1,000 political calculations. Takigakure was a famously reclusive village. They were not one of the Great Five, but their military strength was considerable. Largely due to their possession of a tailed beast. They rarely engaged in international politics, preferring a staunch neutrality. An alliance with them, however tenuous, would be a major coup for Konoha, further solidifying their position after the Iowa summit. And to have two Jinchuriki meet, to form a bond, it could change the global balance of power forever. Or it could be a catastrophic disaster. This is a delicate situation, Naruto, Hiruzen said slowly. Takigakure does not welcome outsiders. Their leader, Shibuki, is young and inexperienced, but fiercely protective of his village and its secrets. I will not go as a threat, Naruto assured him. I will go as a peer. A fellow vessel seeking understanding. The Hokage looked at the boy before him. The boy who had stared down a Sannin and humbled a cage. He radiated a quiet power that was more reassuring than any army. The risk was great, but the potential reward was immeasurable. Very well, Hiruzen said, making his decision. I will sanction this as an A-ranked solo mission. Officially, you are a diplomatic envoy, carrying my greetings and a proposal for a new trade agreement regarding medicinal herbs. Unofficially, you are on your own. I cannot send backup into their territory if things go wrong. Do you understand? Perfectly, Naruto said. He gave a slight bow and turned to leave. Naruto, the Hokage called out, stopping him at the door. Be careful, the world is not ready for you. Tread lightly. Naruto paused, his back still to the old man. The world does not have to be ready, he replied softly. It simply has to adapt. The journey to the land of waterfalls was a transformation. The familiar, sprawling forests of the land of fire gave way to a landscape that was impossibly, vibrantly alive. The trees were older, larger, their trunks thick with moss and festooned with orchids that bloomed in a riot of impossible colors. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, blooming flowers, and the constant, pervasive mist that rose from countless rivers and streams. The soundscape was a symphony of buzzing insects, chattering monkeys, and the omnipresent roar and whisper of moving water. Naruto moved through this world with a silent grace. He didn't need to leap through the trees like a traditional shinobi. He simply willed the space before him to contract and the space behind him to expand, allowing him to glide over the terrain at incredible speeds without disturbing a single leaf. He was an observer, a ghost in this verdant paradise. As he traveled, the psychic song grew stronger, its melody more complex. It was no longer just a single note of joy. It was a full composition, filled with trills of excitement, deep, resonant notes of contentment, and a recurring, powerful theme of loneliness. Not the vast, cosmic loneliness that he knew, but a more terrestrial, more poignant solitude. It was the loneliness of a child in a crowded room, the feeling of being unique and set apart. And the desperate, heartfelt yearning to find another who could hear the same music. He felt an unfamiliar emotion stir within him. Empathy. It was a strange, warm sensation, a resonance not of power, but of spirit. For the first time, he felt a genuine desire to meet the source of this song, not out of curiosity, but out of a shared sense of kinship. He arrived at the border of Takigakure on the third day. There was no wall, no fortified gate. The village's defense was the landscape itself. It was hidden in a colossal basin, completely surrounded by a circular waterfall so vast it seemed to pour from the sky itself. The roar of the water was deafening, a constant, thunderous curtain that would drown out any army and obscure any approach. Naruto didn't try to find a secret entrance. He simply walked to the edge of the cliff overlooking the basin and stepped off. He fell through the roaring cascade of water, his body untouched by the torrential downpour. A bubble of warped space keeping him perfectly dry. He landed softly on the grassy ground inside, the thunder of the falls now a muted, comforting roar that surrounded the entire village. The village itself was breathtaking. It was built into and around a single, impossibly large tree that stood at the center of the basin. The tree's trunk was wider than the Hokage Tower, its branches so vast they created a secondary canopy over the entire village. Houses were built into the trunk, connected by rope bridges, while fields and training grounds were nestled amongst the massive, sprawling roots. It was a place of deep, ancient symbiosis between humanity and nature. His arrival did not go unnoticed. Within seconds, he was surrounded by Taki shinobi, their faces grim, their kunai drawn. They were good. They moved with a fluid, coordinated grace, their chakra signatures blended with the natural energy of the forest. A young man with dark green hair and a determined, anxious expression stepped forward. He wore the formal robes of a village leader, and the chakra of the village's hero water was faintly visible around him. This was Shibuki, the village leader. You are from Konoha, Shibuki stated, his eyes fixed on Naruto's headband. Your presence here is unauthorized. State your purpose. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I bring greetings from the third Hokage, Naruto said, his voice calm and clear, easily audible over the roar of the falls. He produced the diplomatic scroll from an inner pocket. And I have come to meet the source of the song. Shibuki's eyes widened, his professional demeanor cracking for a moment. He exchanged a panicked look with his guards. The song was what they called it too. The irrepressible, joyful energy that their guardian, their Jinchuriki, radiated. How could this outsider know of it? Before Shibuki could formulate a response, a flash of movement from the great tree caught everyone's attention. A figure was leaping down from the high branches, moving with an insect-like agility. She landed in the center of the clearing with a light, energetic bounce. She was a young girl, perhaps a year or two older than Naruto, with mint green hair, bright orange eyes, and a perpetually cheerful expression. She wore a long, white sleeveless blouse and a short, orange skirt. This was Fu. The psychic song exploded in Naruto's mind, no longer a distant melody but a full-blown symphony. It was a feeling of pure, unadulterated excitement. A new person, a friend, he feels warm, like the sun. Fu's orange eyes locked onto Naruto's blue ones, and the world seemed to fall away. For Naruto, it was like looking into a star. Her spirit was so bright, so vibrant, it was almost blinding. He felt the seven tails, Chome, a massive, horned, beetle-like creature, stir within her. It was not a malevolent stirring, but one of joyful recognition. He felt the Kyuubi, Kurama, stir within him in response, a deep, grudging rumble of surprise. The ancient fox's a turd was momentarily silenced by a profound sense of familiarity. For Fu, looking at Naruto was like looking at the night sky for the first time. Her own inner world, which she had always thought was so big and bright, was suddenly revealed to be a tiny part of something infinitely more vast. She saw the calm, quiet strength in his eyes, the deep, endless peace that lay beneath his placid surface. She felt his power, not as a threat, but as a comfort, like the deep, silent earth beneath her feet. He was quiet, where she was loud. He was still, where she was in constant motion. He was the sky, and she was the bird that longed to fly in it. The resonance was instantaneous and overwhelming. A visible aura of energy erupted around them both. Fu's was a shimmering, emerald green, like the light filtering through a forest canopy. Naruto's was a swirling, silver white, filled with the pinpricks of distant stars. The two auras touched, and instead of clashing, they intertwined, swirling toget her to create a miniature aurora borealis in the center of the clearing. From Fu's back, 7 shimmering wings of emerald chakra erupted. Simultaneously, the Kyuubi's power, unbidden, leaked from Naruto, not as the familiar malevolent red cloak, but as 9 tails of pure, silver starlight that swirled around him like ethereal appendages. The Taki shinobi stumbled back, shielding their eyes from the radiant light. They had never seen Fu's power manifest so intensely. Shibuki stared, his mouth agape, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. The connection between them was not just of chakra. It was deeper. The power cosmic, the fundamental energy of life and reality, surged through the link. It touched the nature-based energy of Chome and found a kindred spirit. It was the universe recognizing one of its purest, most vibrant expressions of life. Naruto felt a sudden, profound connection to the world around him. He could feel the life force of the great tree, the flow of water in the falls, the consciousness of every insect in the basin. It was a grounding sensation, a feeling of being a part of a whole that he had never experienced before. His cosmic awareness had always been directed outwards, to the stars. Now, for the first time, it was being pulled inwards, to the heart of the living planet. Fu gasped, her orange eyes wide with wonder. Through her link with Naruto, she was seeing the universe. She saw the earth as a blue marble hanging in the void. She saw the silent dance of asteroids, the fiery breath of the sun, the cold, distant light of galaxies she didn't know the names for. Her desire to see the world was instantly fulfilled and magnified a billionfold. It wasn't scary. It was beautiful. It was home. The light subsided. The ethereal tails and wings faded. Naruto and Fu stood in the center of the clearing, breathing slightly faster, their eyes locked on each other. The silence that followed was profound, filled with a new, unspoken understanding. Fu broke the silence. A massive, brilliant grin spread across her face. "Hi," she chirped, her voice bubbling with an energy that seemed to light up the whole clearing. "My name's Fu. You're really shiny. Wanna be friends?" Her directness, her complete lack of fear or guile, was a force more potent than any jutsu. Naruto found himself at a rare loss. He had anticipated fear, suspicion, aggression. He had not anticipated this pure, unfiltered sincerity. A small, genuine smile touched his lips, a rare expression that softened the cosmic distance in his eyes. "My name is Naruto," he replied, his voice softer than usual. "And yes, I would like that." From high atop the great tree, Fu and Naruto sat on a branch thicker than a country road, their legs dangling over the edge as they looked out at the curtain of the waterfall, now shimmering with the light of the rising moon. After the initial shock, Shibuki had cautiously welcomed Naruto, his diplomatic mission providing the perfect cover story for his presence. Fu had been a whirlwind of energy, dragging Naruto all over her village, showing him her favorite places to nap, introducing him to the giant beetles she considered her friends, and chattering non-stop about everything and nothing. Naruto had listened patiently, a quiet island in her storm of enthusiasm. He learned that she was loved by her village, but also kept isolated. A cherished treasure to be protected from the outside world. Her desire for friendship was a deep, aching void that she filled with relentless cheerfulness. "You're really quiet, you know that," she said, nudging him with her shoulder. "But it's a nice quiet. Not a scary quiet. It feels full, like a library. And you," Naruto replied, looking at her, "are very loud. But it's a nice loud. Not a chaotic loud. It feels alive, like a star being born." Fu beamed, her face lighting up at the strange but heartfelt compliment. "I saw it, you know," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "When we connected, I saw the stars. And they weren't just little lights. They were alive. They were singing." "They are always singing," Naruto said. "Most people just don't know how to listen." "You do," she stated, a simple fact. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a comfortable, natural gesture. "Will you teach me how to listen, Naruto?" He looked at her, at this vibrant, joyful, lonely girl, who had reached out with her spirit and touched the void within him, not with fear, but with friendship. He felt the pure, untainted affection she was directing at him, a simple, powerful force that asked for nothing in return. It was a new and pleasant sensation. "Yes," he said, looking back up at the star-dusted sky that was visible through the mists of the waterfall. "I will." And for the first time in a very long time, Uzumaki Naruto did not feel entirely alone in the universe. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Shadow of the Serpent. Naruto's return to Konoha was akin to a stone dropping into a still pond. On the surface, nothing much had changed. The village was still abuzz with the energy of the Chunin exams, the streets crowded with foreign shinobi and expectant civilians. But beneath the surface, the ripples of his actions were spreading, altering the currents of power in ways no one yet fully understood. He carried the memory of Tokigakure within him, a vibrant counterpoint to the silent, cold expanse of his cosmic consciousness. The resonance with Fu had grounded him in a way he hadn't anticipated. It was like discovering a new primary color. The universe was still a vast, lonely place. But now he knew it contained at least one other soul who could hear its song, and that knowledge was a quiet, comforting warmth. The preliminary matches for the third stage of the exam were to be held in the main arena tower. A smaller, more intimate venue for the brutal one-on-one duels designed to whittle down the remaining participants. Team 7, now reunited, stood on the observation balcony overlooking the arena floor. Sasuke was back on his feet, the cursed seal on his neck contained by a complex sealing formula Kakashi had painstakingly applied. The seal was a vortex of dark, hungry chakra, and even with Kakashi's work, it was a constant, nagging presence. It fed on his ambition, whispering promises of the power he needed to finally face his brother, and, more pressingly, to close the impossible gap between himself and Naruto. The whispers made him irritable, his frustration a sharp, jagged edge. Sakura stood between her two teammates, a tenuous bridge over a chasm of unspoken tension. She was deeply worried about Sasuke, but her gaze kept drifting to Naruto. He seemed different since his solo mission. The profound stillness was still there, but it was no longer as absolute. It was now tempered by a subtle undercurrent of life. It was in the way he watched the clouds through the arena's high windows, the faint, almost imperceptible smile that touched his lips. When he remembered the sound of the great waterfall, he was still a god in mortal clothing, but it was as if he was starting to find the mortal coil a more comfortable fit. The proctor for the preliminaries, a sickly-looking jonin named Hayate Gecko, announced the first match, Uchiha Sasuke vs Yoroi Akato. The fight was a showcase of Sasuke's raw talent and desperation. Yoroi's chakra-draining ability was a dangerous counter to a close-range fighter, but Sasuke, driven by the seal's dark influence and his own burning pride, pushed through. He ended the match with his new signature move, the Lion's Barrage. A brutal taijutsu combination copied from Rock Lee. It was a victory, but a costly one. He collapsed to one knee afterward, clutching his neck as the cursed seal flared with malevolent energy. Black markings spreading across his skin before the containment seal forced them back. As medics carried Sasuke away, Naruto's attention was drawn from the arena floor to the upper balconies. He saw Anko Mitarashi leaning against a pillar, her face pale and beaded with sweat. Her tough, confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a brittle fragility. He could feel the chaotic thrum of her cursed seal, a discordant shriek of pain and dark energy that was far more active than Sasuke's. It was not just influencing her, it was attacking her. He focused his senses, not on her chakra, but on the seal itself. It was a complex and malevolent piece of biological engineering, a parasite of pure will. He could feel Orochimaru's consciousness embedded within it, a cold, reptilian intelligence that was actively trying to break down its host's mind and soul. It was feeding on her trauma, using her memories of her time as Orochimaru's apprentice as fuel. He could feel her mental barriers cracking, her pain a sharp, stabbing note in the psychic symphony of the room. She was losing a battle she didn't even know she was fighting. "I'm withdrawing from my match," Naruto said suddenly, his voice cutting through Sakura's worried chatter about Sasuke. Sakura and Kakashi, who had appeared beside them, turned to look at him in shock. "What? Why?" Sakura asked. "You'd be disqualified. My opponent is of no consequence," Naruto stated, his eyes still fixed on Anko's trembling form across the arena. "There is a more pressing matter." Before Kakashi could demand a better explanation, Anko stumbled, catching herself on the pillar. She clutched her head, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. Several nearby jonin looked over, concerned, but she waved them off with a weak, unconvincing smirk. Then, she pushed off the pillar and staggered towards an exit corridor, her movements stiff and unnatural. "The seal is consuming her," Naruto said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Orochimaru is activating it remotely. He's calling her to him." Kakashi's eye widened in alarm. He followed Naruto's gaze and saw the last of Anko's spiky purple hair disappear down the dark corridor. "Damn it, I'll alert the Hokage." "There's no time," Naruto said. He looked at his sensei, and for a moment, the calm teenager was gone, replaced by something ancient and absolute. "This is not a village matter. This is a personal one. Orochimaru used my presence in the exam to get to her and my teammate. This is my responsibility." Without another word, he vanished. There was no puff of smoke, no swirl of leaves. The space he had occupied was simply empty. Kakashi stared at the spot, a cold dread mixing with a sense of profound awe. He had no way to stop him. He could only trust that the force he had just unleashed upon his enemy was at its heart, on their side. The world had become a nightmare of pain and memory for Anko Mitarashi. The cursed seal, once a dormant, ugly reminder of her past, was now a raging inferno. It burned along her chakra pathways, a fire fed by Orochimaru's will. But the physical pain was secondary to the psychological torment. Memories she had spent years burying were dredged up and thrown at the forefront of her mind with brutal clarity. She remembered the cold, sterile feel of the lab, the glint of a scalpel in Orochimaru's golden, reptilian eyes, the whisper of his voice, promising her power, knowledge, a place by his side, all while his hands performed unspeakable experiments. She remembered the other children, the ones who didn't survive, their faces pale and still. She remembered the day he branded her, the searing agony of the seal, and the far worse agony of his casual dismissal when he cast her aside, deeming her a failed experiment, not strong enough to be his vessel. These memories were no longer passive. The will within the seal was giving them life, twisting them. Orochimaru's voice was no longer a memory, it was a real, seductive whisper in her mind. Come back to me, Anko-chan. You were always my favorite. I can take the pain away. I can give you the power you crave. Just come home. Her body was not her own. She was a puppet, her strings pulled by a master miles away. She moved through the forests on the outskirts of Konoha, her Jonin-level skills allowing her to evade the perimeter patrols on pure instinct, even as her consciousness was drowning. She was heading towards an old, abandoned temple, one of the many forgotten places that Orochimaru used as a temporary hideout. She collapsed just inside the temple's crumbling main hall, her body convulsing. The black markings of the seal spread from her neck, crawling across her skin like venomous tattoos. Her vision blurred. The last thing she saw before the darkness claimed her was a pair of familiar golden eyes, filled not with concern, but with the cold, detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen. A flawed but fascinating reaction, Orochimaru mused, kneeling beside her. Your resentment gives you a certain resistance. But ultimately, you are still mine. He reached out, his long, pale fingers heading for her forehead, intending to complete the process. To either destroy her mind completely or force her into submission. Get your hands off her. The voice was not loud, but it resonated through the stone hull with the force of a temple bell. Orochimaru froze, his head snapping up. Standing in the temple's ruined doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon light, was Uzumaki Naruto. He had not approached with a stealth jutsu, he had simply arrived. Ah, Naruto-kun, Orochimaru hissed, a delighted, predatory smile spreading across his pale face. He rose to his feet, letting his hand drop from Anko. I had a feeling you might come. Such a noble heart, so quick to rush to the aid of a damsel in distress. Even one as used as this. She is a shinobi of Konoha, Naruto said, his blue eyes cold as the void between stars. He took a step into the hall, the shadows seeming to retreat from his presence. And you are a parasite who preys on the pain of others. Pain is a tool, Orochimaru laughed, his body beginning to contort. It is the ultimate catalyst for evolution. I offer power, transcendence. You, of all people, should understand the pursuit of knowledge, the desire to become more than human. The power you hold, it is the ultimate form of existence. Why do you squander it protecting these insignificant insects? You call this evolution. Naruto gestured to Anko's twitching form. This is not growth. It is corruption. You do not create, you only defile. Your quest for immortality has made you nothing but a ghost, a hollow echo clinging to a world you no longer belong to. Orochimaru's smile faded, replaced by a mask of cold fury. You will regret those words. Little god. He opened his mouth, and a torrent of snakes, each one dripping with a potent, flesh-rotting venom, shot towards Naruto. Naruto didn't move, he simply raised a hand, and the air in front of him shimmered. The snakes, upon hitting the invisible barrier, did not just stop. They were unmade. Their biological matter was deconstructed at a molecular level, their life force extinguished. Reduced to a cloud of fine, gray dust that settled harmlessly on the stone floor. Orochimaru stared, his reptilian eyes wide with a mixture of terror and avarice. Incredible. To deconstruct living tissue with pure will, the power of a god indeed. This is not a fight you can win, Orochimaru, Naruto said, taking another step forward. I am not here for you. I am here for her. He walked past the Sannin as if he were a piece of furniture, his focus entirely on Anko. Orochimaru, enraged and intrigued, lunged, his hand transforming into a snake that shot towards Naruto's back. Before it could make contact, an invisible, crushing force slammed into him, pinning him against the far wall of the temple with enough gravitational force to crack the ancient stone. He was held fast, unable to move, able to do nothing but watch. Naruto knelt beside Anko. Her breathing was shallow, her skin clammy. The cursed seal was pulsing with a dark, triumphant light. He placed a hand on her forehead. It was warm, comforting. Anko, he said, his voice soft. I am going to help you. But you must trust me. I need you to open your mind to me. He closed his eyes and pushed his consciousness forward. He did not force his way in. He offered a connection, a single, pure note of calm in the chaotic storm of her mind. He felt her battered consciousness, small and frightened, recoil at his touch. She had been invaded before. But then, she felt the nature of his presence. It was not cold and violating like Orochimaru's. It was vast, yes, but it was also gentle, and filled with an impossible, ancient peace. Hesitantly, she accepted. Naruto's consciousness flowed into hers. He found himself in a landscape of her memories, a twisted, nightmarish version of Orochimaru's lab. In the center of it all was a massive, shadowy serpent, its golden eyes burning with malice. It was the manifestation of Orochimaru's will, the core of the cursed seal. It was wrapped around a smaller, trembling figure, Anko's inner self. "You do not belong here, child," the serpent hissed, its voice echoing through the mental landscape. "This soul is mine." Naruto's astral form manifested not as a human, but as a being of pure starlight, a humanoid constellation. "This soul belongs to itself." His voice was not sound, but pure concept, a thought that imposed its own reality. "You are an echo, a flaw, and you will be erased." The serpent lunged, its fangs dripping with psychic venom. The star being simply raised a hand. From its palm, a beam of pure, white light shot out. It was the light of creation, the fundamental energy that binds and builds the universe. When it struck the serpent, the creature of shadow and malice did not scream. It simply dissolved. The darkness could not exist in the presence of such absolute light. The parasitic will, the encoded memories, the stolen chakra, it was all unwritten from the fabric of her soul. With the serpent gone, the nightmare landscape began to crumble. Naruto's astral form walked towards the trembling representation of Anko. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with awe and fear. He reached out his hand of starlight. "It's over," his thought voice echoed. "He can't hurt you anymore." He showed her a glimpse of what he was. He didn't show her the battles or the power. He showed her the silence. He showed her a newborn star taking its first breath in a cosmic nursery. He showed her the slow, graceful waltz of two galaxies merging over 1 billion years. He showed her the infinite, beautiful, and peaceful reality that existed beyond her pain. He was not just erasing the darkness, he was replacing it with light. In the real world, Anko's body relaxed. The black markings of the cursed seal did not just recede. They flaked away from her skin, turning to inert dust, leaving behind clean, unblemished skin. The malevolent chakra signature that had been a part of her for more than a decade was gone, utterly and completely. She took a deep, shuddering breath. The first clean breath she had taken in years. Naruto withdrew his consciousness and opened his eyes. Anko's eyes fluttered open a moment later. They were clear, free from the shadow of her past. She looked at him, her usual cynical mask gone, her expression one of raw, unguarded vulnerability. She saw not the academy prankster or the powerful genin. She saw the being of starlight from her mind, her savior. Naruto released the gravitational pressure holding Orochimaru to the wall. The Sannin slid to the floor, gasping for air, his mind reeling. He could no longer feel his connection to Anko. That piece of his soul, his will, was not just blocked, it was gone. Annihilated. A part of him had been permanently erased from existence. The fear he felt was a primal, old deep terror that eclipsed anything he had ever known. "What is done to her, I can do to you," Naruto said, his voice flat and absolute. "I can unmake you, piece by piece, until nothing is left but a bad memory. Leave this land. Do not return. If you threaten my home or my comrades again, I will erase you from all reality." Orochimaru stared at him, at the quiet boy who had just threatened him. With a punishment worse than any death he could imagine. He knew, with a scientist's certainty when faced with irrefutable data, that it was not a bluff. He pushed himself to his feet, and with one saint look of burning hatred and abject terror, his body dissolved and flowed away into the shadows. The temple was quiet. Naruto turned back to Anko. She was sitting up now, looking at her own hands as if seeing them for the first time. "He's gone," she whispered, her voice cracking. "From my head. He's really gone." "Yes," Naruto said softly. Tears began to stream down her face. Not tears of sadness, but of profound, overwhelming relief. Her tough, jaded facade crumbled, revealing the broken, terrified girl she had been hiding for so long. She looked at Naruto, at the boy who had walked into the darkest corner of her soul and turned on the lights. He had seen her at her absolute weakest, had witnessed her deepest traumas, and he had not judged or recoiled. He had saved her. Without thinking, she lunged forward and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder, her body shaking with cathartic sobs. It was not a romantic gesture. It was the desperate, clinging embrace of a drowning person to their rescuer. Naruto was momentarily stiff, unused to such physical contact. But then, feeling the raw, unfiltered gratitude and relief pouring from her, he relaxed. He hesitated, raised a hand and placed it on her back, a simple, comforting gesture. He had faced down monsters and gods, debated with cages, and held the universe in his mind. But in that moment, comforting a crying woman in a ruined temple, he felt, for the first time, truly and undeniably human. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Deadliest Woman in the Galaxy. The silence in the cockpit of the Blade of Tartarus was a carefully manufactured illusion. Outside the transparent steel canopy lay the absolute, soundless void of interstellar space, a velvet blackness punctured by the cold, indifferent light of a billion distant suns. Inside, the low, almost subliminal thrum of the scout ship's singularity core and the soft, rhythmic cycling of the air recyclers created a sterile, controlled environment. For Gamora, this manufactured silence was the sound of her life, a constant, low-level hum of technology and tension, the quiet before a storm of violence she was invariably sent to create. She stood before the holographic display, her arms crossed over her chest, her green skin cast in the cool, blue light of the projected data. A rotating sphere, designated by the Galactic Index as Planet 401, hung in the center of the display. It was a vibrant, nauseatingly cheerful-looking world, a swirl of deep blues, stark whites, and an aggressive, almost defiant shade of green. A backwater planet in an uncharted sector of the galaxy. Its inhabitants were pre-stellar, their most advanced technology barely capable of splitting the atom, let alone the void between stars. They were, by every conceivable metric, insignificant. Except for the energy readings. Gamora swiped a hand through the air, and the planetary model was replaced by a complex, fluctuating graph of energy signatures. For the past 3 solar cycles, this insignificant little world had been broadcasting surges of power that had lit up every long-range sensor on the Sanctuary 2, her father's warship, from a dozen parsecs away. The first surge, a brief but impossibly powerful beam of focused energy, had been dismissed as a freak stellar phenomenon. The second, a wave of pure, crushing gravitational force, had been flagged as a potential weapon test, far beyond the planet's known capabilities. The third, a psychic shockwave that had resonated on a conceptual level, had been the one that had truly captured his attention. Her father, Thanos. The name was a bitter acid in her mind. He had sent her to investigate. His orders, delivered by his sycophantic vizier, Corvus Glaive, had been simple: go to the insignificant world. Find the source of the power. Assess its nature. If it is a technology, seize it. If it is a being, break it. If you cannot do either, erase it from existence. Simple orders, for a simple task. But Gamora knew better. Nothing involving her father was ever simple. She zoomed in on the energy's epicenter, a concentrated point on the largest of the planet's continents. The readings were nonsensical. They had the raw, untamed signature of a cosmic-level event, a nascent black hole, a localized reality tear, yet they were stable, contained, almost dormant. It was like finding a supernova contained within a glass bottle. A part of her, a small, treacherous part she kept buried beneath layers of brutal training and cynical resignation, felt a flicker of hope. For years, she had been his blade, his deadliest tool. She had conquered worlds in his name, extinguished civilizations, all while nursing a cold, burning hatred for the monster who called himself her father. She had seen firsthand the extent of his power, his nihilistic ambition to bring balance to the universe through mass genocide. And she knew that he was, for all intents and purposes, unstoppable. But this power was something new, something the Mad Titan had not accounted for in his meticulous, insane calculations. If it was real, if it was a power she could understand, perhaps even ally with, the thought was a dangerous spark in the dry tinder of her soul. The hope for a weapon, a champion, someone who could finally stand against him. Entering atmospheric insertion, the ship's calm, synthetic voice announced. Stealth systems engaged. No hostile detection signatures. Take us in, silent and deep, Gamora commanded, her voice a low, precise alto. Land at the designated coordinates. Full sensor sweep of the area. I want to know if I'm walking into an army or an apocalypse. The blade of Tartarus angled down, its metamaterial hull shifting to become completely invisible to all forms of electromagnetic detection. It sliced through the upper atmosphere without a sound, a phantom of advanced technology descending upon a world of wood, steel, and what their probes had identified as a bizarre, biologically generated energy source the natives called chakra. The Valley of the End was a place saturated with history. The very air felt heavy with the echoes of a titanic battle fought between the founders of Konoha. A conflict of ideals so powerful it had scarred the land itself. Two colossal statues, depicting Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, stood on opposite sides of a great waterfall, locked in an eternal, silent confrontation. The roar of the water as it crashed into the lake below was a constant, thunderous applause for a drama that had ended generations ago. For Gamora, it was just another piece of primitive, oversized sculpture. Impressive, in a brutish, unsophisticated way, but ultimately meaningless. She stood on a cliff overlooking the valley, her black leather bodysuit blending into the shadows of the ancient trees. Her ship was cloaked a mile away, and she had proceeded on foot, her cybernetically enhanced senses drinking in the alien environment. The air was thick, humid, and overwhelmingly organic. It smelled of wet stone, decaying leaves, and 1,000 different kinds of pollen. It was a chaotic, untamed world, and she hated it already. Her wrist-mounted scanner was proving to be utterly useless. The ambient energy in the valley was so overwhelming that it couldn't isolate a single source. The entire gorge, the statues, the water, the very rock beneath her feet, all say Emed to be radiating the cosmic signature she had crossed a quadrant of the galaxy to find. It was as if she had been sent to find a specific drop of water in the middle of an ocean. Source localized. Her scanner's voice whispered in her ear through a subvocal calm. Energy signature is ambient, but appears to be focused. Atop the western effigy, Gamora's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, snapped to the statue of Madara Uchiha. She saw nothing at first. Then, her enhanced vision picked out a small, still figure, seated cross-legged on the very top of the statue's head, directly in the spray of the waterfall. A boy, clad in simple black and orange clothing. He was meditating, seemingly oblivious to the roaring cascade and the dizzying height. She analyzed him through her scanner's optical feed. No technology detected. No significant chakra readings, according to the ship's analysis of the local energy. He registered as a native life form, biologically unremarkable. He was either a complete irrelevance, a local shaman who just happened to like meditating in a high-energy zone, or he was the most effective shield for a power source she had ever encountered. Given her father's interest, she decided to bet on the latter. Her mission parameters were clear. Assess, break, erase. She decided to begin with a gentle, probing assessment. Her version of gentle, of course, was calibrated on a galactic scale of violence. She moved, not with the crackle of displaced air like a shinobi, but with the silent, fluid deadliness of a predator. She flowed down the cliff face, her movements a poem of controlled muscle and honed instinct. She crossed the raging river in a series of perfectly placed leaps, her feet touching the churning water for no more than a microsecond. She scaled the colossal statue of Madara without a sound, her fingers and toes finding purchase in cracks no wider than a credit chip. In less than a minute, she was standing on the stone hair of the statue, a few feet behind the meditating boy. Her presence completely masked, her shadow falling over him. He did not stir. This was the moment of truth. She drew a small, cylindrical device from her belt and rolled it silently across the stone. It came to a stop a few inches from the boy's foot. She pressed a button on her gauntlet. The device emitted a localized neuroelectric pulse, calibrated to instantly knock out a fully grown Kree warrior without killing him. To a primitive like this, it should have been enough to stop his heart. The pulse washed over the boy. He didn't so much as flinch. His breathing didn't even hitch. It was as if she had thrown a pebble at a mountain. Gamora's eyes narrowed. This was no shaman. She abandoned stealth. In a movement so fast it was little more than a green and black blur, she lunged. Her hand chopping down in a strike aimed at the boy's neck. It was a blow designed to shatter the spine of a Cronin. Her hand never connected. The boy's arm came up, not with speed, but with an unnerving, almost lazy grace. He caught her wrist. His grip was not crushing. It was simply absolute. She felt no strain, no tensed muscle. It was like being stopped by a fundamental law of physics. She might as well have been trying to punch the concept of gravity. He opened his eyes. They were blue. A deep, impossible blue, like the heart of a blue giant star. And they were ancient. They held a calm, placid, and utterly soul-shaking wisdom. "You are a long way from home," Uzumaki Naruto said, his voice quiet, yet it carried over the roar of the waterfall as if they were in a library. Gamora reacted with the pure, violent instinct that had kept her alive her entire life. She twisted her body, using his grip as a fulcrum, and lashed out with her other leg in a sweeping kick aimed at his head. It was a move that had once decapitated a Chidori general. He released her wrist and leaned back, the kick passing a millimeter from his face. He didn't even seem to be trying. It was a dance, and he already knew all the steps. "Your movements are precise," he commented, his tone one of detached, academic interest. "Efficient. A martial art refined over generations of conflict. But you are fighting my body, not me." Infuriated by his calm, Gamora pressed the attack. She became a whirlwind of motion, a torrent of strikes, kicks, and grapples drawn from 1,000 different worlds, 1,000 different fighting styles. She was the deadliest woman in the galaxy, and she fought with the brutal grace that had earned her the title. Each blow carried enough force to shatter stone. ACH movement was calculated for maximum lethality. And Naruto simply moved. He flowed around her, a leaf on the wind. He parried a bone-breaking strike with a single finger. He deflected a lethal kick with a gentle, open-handed push. He never once countered. He only defended, his movements so minimalist and perfect that it was infuriating. He was not fighting her. He was observing her, analyzing her. Like a scholar reading a particularly interesting book. "Your body has been augmented," he noted as he effortlessly ducked under a spinning backfist. "Cybernetic enhancements to your skeletal and muscular structure. A redundant nervous system. Very impressive." The fact that he could discern her most intimate biological secrets in the middle of a life or death struggle was more terrifying than any display of brute force. Her frustration boiled over into cold rage. This was not an assessment anymore. This was an execution. "Enough," she snarled, leaping back and creating distance between them. A seam on her gauntlet hissed open, and the hilt of her sword, Godslayer, telescoped into her hand. A blade of shimmering, otherworldly metal extended with a soft hum. It was a weapon forged in the heart of a dying star. Capable of cutting through the hull of a battleship. She lunged, the sword a silver streak of light, aimed directly at his heart. "Let's see your body handle this." Naruto stood his ground. He made no move to evade. As the tip of the legendary blade was about to pierce his chest, he raised his hand and caught it between his thumb and forefinger. The sword stopped dead. A shockwave of kinetic energy erupted from the point of impact, cracking the stone beneath their feet. The blade, a weapon that had slain gods and monsters, screamed in protest, a high-pitched metallic whine that vibrated through Gamora's entire arm. It was held fast, trapped by an impossible, immovable force. "An interesting alloy," Naruto said, his eyes examining the blade. "Carbon silicate matrix, forged under immense gravitational pressure. It is designed to be indestructible." He looked up from the blade and met her stunned, disbelieving gaze. "A flawed design premise. Nothing is indestructible. Some things are just harder to unmake than others." With a casual flick of his fingers, he snapped the tip off Godslayer. The shard of metal, once part of one of the deadliest weapons in the known universe, fell to the stone with a pathetic clink before Naruto dissolved it into dust with a thought. Gamora stared at her broken sword, then at the boy who had broken it as easily as a dry twig. Every instinct, every fiber of her enhanced being, screamed at her. Impossible, impossible, impossible. This was not a planetary champion. This was not a weapon. This was something else entirely. The flicker of hope she had felt on her ship now blazed into a terrifying, world-altering bonfire. She dropped the hilt of her broken sword and activated the weapons in her gauntlets. Twin plasma blasters whined to life. Glowing with a menacing orange light, she fired, not a single shot, but a sustained, full-power barrage, a torrent of energy hot enough to melt through a moon. The plasma bolts flew towards Naruto, and then, a few feet from his body, they simply stopped. They hung in the air, sizzling and spitting, held in place by an invisible field. He looked at the globes of incandescent energy with mild curiosity. Crude, but effective, he said. He waved a hand, and the plasma bolts were snuffed out like candles in a breeze, their energy harmlessly dissipated into the atmosphere. He took a step towards her. This was it, the moment of truth. She could not beat him. She could not break him. The only option left was to erase him. On her comm, she had a direct link to her ship's primary weapon. A tactical-grade particle beam capable of sterilizing a continent. All it took was a word. Her word. But she hesitated. She looked into his calm, ancient eyes and she did not see a monster. She did not see a tyrant like Thanos, who reveled in his power. She saw peace, an absolute, unshakable peace that was more powerful than any weapon. "Who are you?" she finally whispered, her voice raw. The question that everyone who encountered him eventually asked. Naruto stopped a few feet from her. The roar of the waterfall seemed to fade into the background, the entire world narrowing to the space between them. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he said. "And this is my home." He tilted his head, a gesture of genuine curiosity. "Now, it is my turn to ask. Who are you, and why have you come here to try and kill me?" Gamora stood panting, her blasters still aimed at him, their charge whining uselessly. She was the deadliest woman in the galaxy, a being feared on 1,000 worlds. And she had just been dismantled. Physically and emotionally, without her opponent throwing a single punch. He had broken her legendary sword with his fingers, neutralized her energy weapons with a gesture, and had weathered her most lethal attacks without a scratch. And now, he was asking for her name, his expression not of anger or triumph, but of simple, honest inquiry. Her entire life had been defined by violence. By the principle that might makes right. The strongest ruled, the weakest died. It was the law of her father, the law of the universe as she knew it. But this boy, this being, he was the strongest thing she had ever encountered. And yet, he wielded his power with the restraint of a monk. He could have unmade her as easily as he had unmade her sword, but he hadn't. That choice, that single act of mercy, was a more profound demonstration of power than anything Thanos had ever shown her. She slowly lowered her arms, the plasma blasters powering down with a soft sigh. She was defeated, utterly and completely. But for the first time in her life, defeat did not taste of ash and humiliation. It tasted of awe, and of a terrifying, dangerous, beautiful hope. "My name," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her soul. As Gamora. Chapter 6 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.